Buenas tardes, estimados colegas, amigas.
Que se va a analizar desde el punto de vista bioético y jurídico. Nuestro sentido homenaje a Francis Mojica, a quien agradecemos que haya aceptado.
Thank you very much for having accepted the chairing of this Congress. He was the promoter of this innovation and even the name CRISPR, the acronym in English of Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. Before the official opening, we will listen to Mr. Francis Mojica. He has sent an audio, a video. Thanks to CRISPR, we can edit genes and repair those mutated and that have caused diseases. Undoubtedly, it is a very important issue of translational research. It is not science fiction. It is not the future. It is the present. Some drugs have been approved to cure some kind of anemia that is genetically transmitted. And in a close future, we will be able to cure other diseases via CRISPR. Technological capacity increases, but new questions arise and new challenges, and they require ethical reflection and legal norms. With devotion, we have elaborated a scientific agenda for this conference. In the official opening, the current universe of CRISPR tools, applications and challenges, Mr. Lluís Montoliu, just awarded with the award CSIC Foundation BBVA on Scientific Communication, will present with rigor and clarity some scientific aspects of genetic editing. Later on, we will have three sections. One to reflect on bioethical aspects, and another one on legal matters, and a third section on social impact of genetic editing. To do so, we have the experience and knowledge of 17 national and international experts in different areas or fields of action. They will give us talks, and they will also participate in roundtables, and will invite us to reflect and discuss the opportunities and challenges of this new technology, CRISPR. Furthermore, debate will be enriched with oral communications that will be presented in the plenary sessions. Other interesting contributions will be given in the format of a scientific poster. Once again, the educational agenda that is so much beloved among the SIBI members will allow us to listen to students of secondary schools, in public and private schools, and also their teachers under the coordination of the Center of Teachers and Resources of Gijón Oriente. The official closing conference entitled Taking Advantage of the Global Potential of Genome Editing by the North American Alda Charo, who is Professor of Right and Bioethics at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Simultaneously, we will give the award SIBI 2024 to Professor Mr. Juan Ramón La Cadena Calero, who is Emeritus Chair of Genetics of the University Complutense de Madrid, to acknowledge his merits and proposals and reflections on bioethical aspects regarding scientific and technological uses. I'd like to show my gratitude to all the members of the Foundation SIBI, as well as the members of the Scientific Committee, and more specifically to the Organizing Committee, speakers, chairmen and chairwomen. Thank you to those who have sent communications, thank you to all participants, and thank you to the Technical Secretariat under the chairing of Ms. Beatriz García Arbiza. Thanks to all of them, we will have a very successful Congress. Thank you very much to professional schools for their enthusiasm and collaboration, the management of FIBMA, and all the sponsors who have also provided us with their support. This Congress has been made possible thanks to the effort and the constant work of many people who have been able to overcome many external difficulties experienced in recent times. But above all, it illustrates perseverance, that is, the inner struggle each of us has with ourselves on an everyday basis to maintain throughout the time commitment with the word, with the speech, with vocation, with excellence. Because following Aristotle, we are what we do on an everyday basis. And thus, excellence is not an act, but a habit. The conference that is being held in the city of Gijón, city in which technology and science live together with art and culture, headquarters of the SIBI and lighthouse of bioethics, aims to be a reflection space with rigor, constructive dialogue that contributes with the knowledge on how to use knowledge to respect more the dignity of every person and all the persons, and to protect the environment. Thank you so much. I will now give the floor to the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Félix Baragaño Suárez. Thank you very much, Isolina. Regional Minister of Science, Business and Training of the Government of the Principality of Asturias. Councillor for Social Services, Social Affairs, Ms. Ángela. Representative of the University of Oviedo, President of the SIBI, honorific President, Mr. Marcelo, authorities, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. First of all, congratulations to the organizers and welcome to the participants of this World Congress on Bioethics. It is for us a great satisfaction to welcome you all here at the Congress venue of Gijón. 12th Congress, all of them held here in Gijón, in our Fair Trade Center, Luis Adaro, and this illustrates the trust given to the Chamber of Commerce of Gijón, and we thank you for that. An example of collaboration for the common good, and which has been very fruitful throughout these years. Allow me these minutes to address you and highlight, first of all, the work performed by Marcelo Palacios for so many years related to the International Society of Bioethics. His capacity of analysis, reflection from a moral and ethical standpoint regarding medical issues have turned SIBI into an international benchmark. Undoubtedly, Marcelo, this is not for free. This is due to all your invested efforts, and they deserve to be acknowledged by the International Medical Society and Asturian Society, more specifically. And I would like to wish success to Ms. Isolina. The trust Marcelo has given you undoubtedly will allow you to continue making headway in this initiative, and for sure you will have our support. One of the main concerns we have always had in the Chamber of Commerce of Gijón is to offer spaces and proposals for social discussion, financial, scientific, cultural, whatever, so that we get responses that improve our environment. This year's Congress will address bioethical and legal issues of genetic editing, which is regarded as one of the most relevant scientific innovations in 2023. High technical level, and therefore Gijón is at the epicenter of constructive dialogue. People from Gijón and Asturias should be proud of holding such a congress or conference. Let's not forget that society demands responses to new and old problems. In this case, science can face many of these questions. Ethical approach will also have an impact on the life our children will inherit from us, and above all, it will be a step forward. And we'll conclude by again congratulating the organizers of this World Conference. I wish you a very fruitful conference, and I hope that we meet again in the 13th World Conference in 2 years. And those of you who come from outside Asturias or from abroad, I hope that you enjoy our lovely land and autonomous community, Asturias.
A continuación tiene la palabra don...
Now we'll give the floor to Mr. Roger Campìone, Professor of Philosophy of Law at the University of Oviedo, on behalf of Mr. Ignacio, who is Rector of the University of Oviedo.
Señor consejero,
dear Regional Minister, Councillor, President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Isolina, President of the SIBI, Mr. Marcelo, honorific President of the SIBI, good afternoon or good evening rather to you all. It is a pleasure for me to be here. It is more a pleasure than an honor to be here today representing the University of Oviedo on behalf of our rector, Mr. Ignacio, who could not make it today, but he wants me to welcome you all on his behalf. It is a pleasure before than an honor to represent the University of Oviedo, because in this case, some criteria are fulfilled. 3, more specifically. It is a privilege for me to be here representing the University of Oviedo, but I feel almost thrilled because I should be sitting there with my colleagues as a member of the organizing committee of this conference. I want to thank them very much for their work on behalf of the university, and also because I have learned so much from Isolina, Jesus, Pablo, Beatriz. It's incredible. Lluís as well has taught me a lot. And the third condition or criteria that makes me very happy to be here is my professional career. Me, as a professional or expert, I come from a field of action that is law, philosophy, is bioethics by nature. Why? Well, because it is located in a territory that is always a boundary. The crossbreed or the crossbreeding, the cultural mix is part of its nature. So this science is between different fields of action, norms, values, and therefore ethics, technology, scientific knowledge. And bioethics is a bit of everything. Before the President, Isolina, mentioned, on the basis of a definition we learned a long time ago, bioethics is the knowledge of how to use knowledge. With the passing of time, this definition that may seem a paradox, no? A knowledge of knowledge, well, it becomes more important, more current, and more relevant, and also more accurate. Why? Well, because in a society that advances in such a fast way, and in which scientific knowledge, technique, progress are more and more less controllable, demand increases, demand of stopping to reflect or even to ask ourselves some questions regarding the values, that is the standpoint through which everything that comes to us and is new has to be incorporated. And therefore we need some rules for the society to make headway, but always with open eyes, with an open mindset. And these kind of conferences are ideal, are great to face these questions, these issues with experts in a variety of matters, but all of them aim to how to make that scientific progress of knowledge is also a social progress. That is why it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today, and on behalf of the University of Oviedo, thank you very much to the authorities who are with us here at the panel, and thank you to the SIBI that allows these conferences to take place.
And now, Ángeles Fernández Aguja, the Councillor for Social Affairs and Housing of the Gijón City Council, is representing the Mayoress and President of the SIBI Foundation, Carmen Moriyón Entrialgo. You have the floor. Thank you, Isolina. Good evening, dear Councillor, dear Roger, Félix, Isolina, and of course our dear Marcelo Palacios, and of course dear authorities, scientific authorities, academic authorities, that are attending this opening ceremony. First of all, I'd like to apologize the absence of the Mayoress Carmen Moriyón. She couldn't make it for a clashing agenda, but I am honored to convey to you her best wishes for you to be attending this conference in our lovely city. She wants you to enjoy your stay in the city, and it is an honor and a privilege for us to be attending this 12th SIBI conference, this bioethical conference organized by SIBI. As I was saying, it is an honor and a privilege because since day one, SIBI has addressed sort of or represents kind of tranquility and calm when reflecting upon these unstoppable scientific breakthroughs. In this world, we have technological advances every day, they're unstoppable. And I think bioethics and the analysis from the ethical point of view of all these breakthroughs that can be seen in the scientific world is a challenge that should make us reflect upon it, because it has many questions that we can ask. What to go and what extent do these challenges have? For example, in this conference, we will be talking about CRISPR technique. I am not an expert in that issue, but I know that it was born in the 80s, thanks to a Spanish professor, Francis Mojica. And after 2015, it really became a revolution in the medical field, because in the end, it is intended to what all breakthroughs should be intended to treat pathologies, to cure illnesses for everyone. And that is something that is very respectable. This is something that we should always respect. By modifying the DNA sequences, the diseases, the pathologies can be located and treated. And that is a great decision to talk about CRISPR in this edition, in this occasion. So without further ado, I want to wish you luck in this conference. Please enjoy our lovely city. And I just want to conclude by paying homage to Mr. Marcelo Palacios, who is retiring, so to say, is an honorary professor of this city. What would SIBI be without him? Because they will be together hand in hand, even if he has partially retired, so to say. So I wish you the best of luck in your new enterprises, and especially you, Isolina, Riaño, the new president. Thank you.
A continuación,
now we'll give the floor to the Science, Innovation and University Councillor of the Principado de Asturias, the region of Asturias, Mr. Sánchez García. Thank you. And of course, I want to join my colleagues in thanking the organization for having us here today for such a relevant topic, such a hot topic. And I want to greet the authorities that are here with me at the table, and the scientific authorities, the most important ones. You're going to shed much light on these topics that have been mentioned by my colleagues. And I just want to also join you in thanking and paying homage to Marcelo Palacios, because of the strength and the boost he's given to SIBI, the society, because it puts Asturias in the map of this kind of debates. For example, how these technologies, CRISPR-Cas9, can affect us, and subsequent technologies. So I want to thank you, Marcelo, for your task, and I also want to greet the new president of the Scientific Committee, Isolina. And a few topics have already been mentioned, a few ethical issues. They are important for our region because, of course, we want to know how to use that knowledge and how to transform it, how to convey it, how to transfer it to practical applications, employment, etc. Because we want to be very practical. That's why we want to use it to define our new productive model based on scientific knowledge, of course, but not at any price. The conference that will be delivered by Lluís Montoliu will be spot on this topic because, of course, we want the scientific knowledge to reach those in need. We want it to be able to create employment, but at the same time, we need to consider the ethical and legal issues associated to it. He will be talking about Cas9. I'm a microbiologist, so I know something about it, and Francis discovered CRISPR-Cas9 in an archaeobacteria, and I've been working with bacteria, bifidobacteria, and of course they have Cas9 system too. So look at the evolution, the very fast evolution it has undergone, because 20 years mean nothing, but the time these kind of disruptive breakthroughs use between applications is becoming shorter and shorter. So I think Francis's genius lies in transforming something that 20 years ago was totally ununderstandable and unintelligible, and now he identified it as a potential immune system for an archaeobacteria, and well, that's it. And then genetic addition, well, was part of that too. I also think that Francis Mojica should have received the Nobel Prize. But at least we know that the scientific knowledge can be disruptive. So we need to cover some ethical issues at the same time. If we look back, and if we look at how the technology has impacted, for example, the field of communication, if we are now talking about the ethical constrictions and considerations of artificial intelligence, we get ChatGPT is nothing if we compare it to the things that are still to come. CRISPR will be a major breakthrough when it comes to custom applications, but in the wrong hands it will be a catastrophe. I've never seen catastrophe. So that's all from me. I will be happy to follow and to see the light that will be shed by you, the challenges and the opportunities that you will be identifying in the field of CRISPR-Cas9 and any other technologies that you will be mentioning or that we will be seeing in the future. They will be more accurate and with more transforming potential. Thank you. And finally, I'm giving the floor to Marcelo Palacios Alonso, the Honorary President of the Scientific Committee of SIBI. Good evening. It is an honor for me to be able to talk before you and to take part in this table with very dignified representatives from very different institutions, and I'd like to thank the boards of the research counselor who's given me the floor, who's given me the opportunity to talk last. Maybe because I will be speaking here for the last time, and we of course thank Dr. Isolina Riaño for taking the opportunity to become the new president. And I want to start by remembering with all of you, without asking for a minute of silence, the people who are no longer with us, but who have been with us since 1997, the foundation of the SIBI, who were part of this pillar that has made it possible for this institution to be one of the most prestigious ones. Professor Erwin Deutsch from Germany, Professor Hector Bros from Uruguay, Professor Agnes Pravianos Arbenitis from Greece, Professor Margarita Salas, Professor Santiago Ruiz Olía in Spain, Professor Santiago de Seur, also from Spain. They were really prestigious scientists, and they created the pillar. They were humble, and they wanted to convey their knowledge to the society in the most innovative way of understanding science, the one advocated for by bioethics, sustained by ethical and legal grounds. But they haven't left us alone, because SIBI is now a very strong society, as you can see in the quality of the presentations and papers. The prestige is also shared by the people who have recently joined the scientific committee. For example, Professor Vittoria Ivone from Italy, Professor Natalia Lopez Moratalla from Spain, Professor Rafael Namatesan from Spain, Professor Luis Montoliu, who will be giving the keynote lecture, and the former Chancellor of Health. In 1997, in April 1997, the 4th of April, in Asturias, a document was signed. It is the 5th most important document in the history of humankind, the Convention of Human Rights and Biomedicine, the Bioethics Convention of the Council of Europe. This is not just my words. President Balladur and the Pope and more international prestigious authorities are of the same opinion. And a few days before that, the President of the Council of Europe and the Secretary General came to Gijón to say that they were proud to see the signing of this convention here in Oviedo, in Asturias. Especially in Gijón, and then it moved to Oviedo. So they personally came to say thank you. So the idea was that the convention needed like a gardener who curated its contents, its many articles, and the gardener was the SIBI, and that's why SIBI was founded in December the same year at the Jovellanos Theatre, with people from all over the places. The most illustrious people I have ever met. As you've seen, some of them have already gone, because life, of course, has its biological constraints. But SIBI was made possible, and it gained the prestige it has now, And you might think that I'm exaggerating, but you can also you can surf the net and see how many references to SIBI. You can find millions of them. Our website has been translated to 11 languages, so that also facilitates for people to get to know us thanks to very solid pillars. First of all, those who support us, who believed in us. The Gijón City Council, the government of Asturias, the Ramón Areces Foundation, who decided to support us, the Chamber of Commerce, and many other institutions that stood by us. Because an idea is important, but if you don't have people to back your idea, you're not likely to move it forward. Secondly, a wonderful scientific committee that is more and more prestigious with the people that are still joining it. And then the pedagogical, the training program, some Nobel Prize awardees really praised it. It is a training program for secondary school students that come here and present what they've done. And Nobel laureate said, well, this is the first time I've seen this. We don't have this in France. Would like to see students attending our conferences, and would like to talk. We'd like to see 13-year-old students ask us questions. So they were the pillars that made the SIBI, that made it possible for the SIBI to move forward. And then in the Cuenca conference a few years ago, at the request of some attendees from Argentina, SIBI takes place always in Gijón. Always in Gijón, because people requested for this kind of conferences, this biannual conference to take place in Gijón because of the gastronomy, the landscape, and the communication. So we asked for this conference to take place always in Gijón, and that's the way it is. Some other cities requested to host it, Vienna, Valencia, etc., but we rejected it. So SIBI is that, and it also has many invisible engines. For example, we have the secretary of the scientific committee, Beatriz, who also makes this possible. She knows that I will be mentioning her, and that's why she disappears. She is the fundamental pillar of this society. Without Beatriz, this wouldn't have been possible. SIBI couldn't have made it here. And I will conclude by saying, well, I could talk for longer, but I will be just saying that many people responded to our call for papers, or when we requested them to come with just our affection. That's the only reason they accepted to come, but we've had people from all over the world who've come to Spain and to this region, who is able to host this kind of conferences and to be the host of so many visitors. Well, we have this kind of facilities and this venue and our organizing capacities, the people who Félix Baragaño puts at our disposal, and then Beatriz with her skills also makes this possible. This is Beatriz. So, as I was saying, at the Cuenca conferences, many people asked for Gijón to be considered the international venue for bioethics, international headquarters for this bioethics conference, and it is an honor for me. I'm very proud of this, even if some other places requested to host this conference, but well, SIBI stays here and this conference stays here. So SIBI promotes understanding among people by advocating peace and acting against suffering, wars, and violence in general. So we have organized conference and all those topics, and that's the way we choose our topics. And with the new blood, Isolina, Riaño will be injecting in this society. SIBI will always be a source of pride for Gijón, for Asturias, and for science in general, and the world of bioethics. Something that until recently nobody knew what it was. So many people used to ask me, oh, when is the next botanical conference? What? Robotics conference? No. But now everybody, when a taxi driver or anybody else talks to me, they know that I represent the bioethical conference. So now Gijón is conveying to the rest of the world, it is disseminating the use of bioethics, the fight against poverty, war, and living in a world full of respect. Thank you.
Bien, pues queda inaugurado este 12º Congreso Mundial de...
So it's officially opened, the 12th World Conference on Bioethics. Thank you.
A continuación tendremos la...
So now we're going to listen to Mr. Francis Mojica, who holds a chair, also a researcher, and discovered CRISPR techniques. And then after him, Mr. Lluís Montoliu will give a talk, the official.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good evening to you all. It is a great privilege to have been appointed as the president of the 12th World Conference on Bioethics. I am really sorry I could not make it. I'm sure I would have learned a lot from you. Although I ask myself whether my attendance would have contributed to any benefit to the conference. In the work by Manuela Pienza, a philosopher who was born in Asturias, he looks into the justice challenges posed by genetic editing. He says that our future, even the future of our species, is closely linked to scientific progress, especially the advance of genetic engineering. And I quote this statement because some other of his statements may be, well, subject to legal interpretation, but not this one. It is always possible to perform more experiments to validate or disregard a hypothesis. But when we talk about ethical issues, moral issues, well, the challenge is not that good. His book represents my second approach to moral readings. The first one was the Fundamental Metaphysics by Kant. And I must admit that, the same as in the previous case, it is frustrating not to be able to understand every detail of what I consider as important, as complex, above all if talking about CRISPR systems functioning. My last conference entitled The Limits of CRISPR, I just mentioned briefly some of the risks of the uses of CRISPR technology and the crucial role played by scientific responsibility, the sense of responsibility of scientific researchers. As I usually do, in my talk I focused on immunology, biology, on the basis of which we have built the CRISPR tools. And I also tackled aspects such as the intrinsic malignity science, which is a mechanism used by bacteria to defend themselves from the virus that try to destroy them. The perfect balance with the attacking forces always following nature laws. As a biological system, the balance is lost if you take it out of context. If we transfer the bacteria development to human cells, it becomes a puzzle with many pieces through which philosophers, politicians, physicians, patients, the different groups of society observe from their own perspectives. With the participation of everybody, now we have to re-establish the balance between bias and benefits, safety and risk, taking the new laws into account. And that is what we're doing. Well, you are doing, because I am not there in person in Gijón, but I will be present in spirit. I have no doubt that this Congress or this conference will contribute to establishing that balance, needed balance, between what genetic editing is capable of doing and what is regarded as appropriate from an ethical and legal standpoint. I hope you enjoy the sessions, the talks, and I hope you have fruitful debates. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes a todos, querida.
Good afternoon to you all, or rather evening. Dear Isolina, dear Marcelo, dear colleagues of the scientific conference of the SIBI, colleagues coming from many places worldwide. It is a real pleasure for me to be here to start this Congress, to officially open this Congress, to tackle legal and ethical aspects of this innovation, this technology that has changed our life radically, my life and many other researchers' life. Because we are using these technologies in the lab, and for more than 10 years we are performing experiments we had never dreamt of doing. One of the persons who taught me bioethics, Javier Garzo, mentioned that good ethics start with good data. And that is what I will try to do in the next minutes. I will try to establish the current universe of tools, CRISPR, where we are, the status quo, what we have achieved, and the challenges ahead. And obviously, I could not start any other way, being in Gijón in Spain, paying tribute to Mr. Francisco Juan Martínez Mojica, Francis Mojica, who has just addressed us some words in a very humble way, as usually he does. But without him, we would not be here today. Without his work, without his wisdom, curiosity to understand how microorganisms that are present in Santa Pola in Alicante can bear that degree of salinity. With that curiosity, what did he want to solve? Well, while investigating that topic, he faced something that, biologically speaking, probably for many other researchers, they would have neglected or ignored. But those people who have enough talent to understand that they are facing important elements for the history of science, he found some sequences that repeated themselves, and they were spaced by other sequences, and each of them were diverse. He was not the first one realizing this issue, but he was the first one to realize how relevant that was, and devoted the rest of his life to study these sequences. And the consequence, you know, more or less what it was. In November 2001, first of all, to try to organize the system a little bit, because each of the researchers were naming the repetitions with a different name, he coined an acronym. We will always remember that his wife Helen said, CRISPR, it looks like a name of a dog. Yeah. CRISPR sounds like cereals at breakfast, really. But when you have heard it many times or some couple of times, you never forget it anymore. Everybody talks about CRISPR, and it was coined in Alicante, at the university in Alicante, because that is where these microbiologists work. And he refers to these cluster regular interspace short palindromic repeats. But he moved on, and then when you point at the moon with your finger, what is relevant is not the finger but the moon. For many years the researchers were just counting and recounting these repeats, but then he realized, no, what is relevant is the sequences between the repeats, and they were fragments of genome of virus that infect the bacteria. And he linked this to a singular observation, that is, the bacteria that had acquired a fragment of a virus were or became resistant to that virus. So, crystal clear, he discovered an immunological system that uses bacteria with a genetic basis, because the bacteria capturing a fragment of a virus transferred that fragment to the inheritors. So he discovered the way by which bacteria defend themselves from those actions of the virus. Well, it took him a long time to publish this work, but he thought that nobody would read it, and that was not the case. In the next year, in 2020, two researchers who discovered his work and studied it and observed from another point of view were awarded with a very important prize. You know, Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna met in Santiago de Puerto Rico at a congress, and they decided to start working on CRISPR systems and turned them in a real tool for genetic editing. They described it in 2012, a pioneer article published in Science, and 8 years after they were awarded with a Nobel Prize, Chemistry Nobel Prize. We would have loved these two ladies be together with Francis, but Francis was involved in the development of this innovation and many other innovations created by other researchers. So these tools that are created to defend themselves, they can become some tools as well to edit genes. In 20 years, at least these 12 people have contributed to CRISPR development. This is my vision of the field. To the left, the first one, Francis, central position, the two researchers that were awarded with the Nobel Prize. They transformed this defense system into a genetic editing system, and the next four work in Boston, and they demonstrated, starting in January 2013, they proved that the ideas by Jovan were in science. I would like to add a third researcher, a third line of researcher, because I think that if any time someone would give a Nobel Prize for a technology, this should be awarded to Mr. David Liu. David Liu, a colleague of Sens Lang in the Broad Institute, he has given us the third, also the second, but the third generation of CRISPR tools, and he has revolutionized this field, solving the problems of the first order generation tools. I'd also like to refer to the following fact. Although we are all the time talking about CRISPR tools, they are only the fourth generation of genetic tools. We started in 1995 with the meganuclease, with a null or void versatility. They recognized the great sequences of DNA, and they promoted this editing by either you had the sequence or you did not have it. Then we faced a transition period with two types of tools. In 2001, the ZFN, zinc nucleus, with some bindings, but in essence they did the same. The TALEN, in 2011, they meant a conceptual shift because they were artificial, manufactured in laboratory, and they started from some proteins that have some bacteria that kill plants. However, any of these three tools were difficult to work with. It was quite complicated to get them working in your project. And in 2013, 2012, 2013, the proposal by Jean Verdier, and in 2013, the first experiments were started. Everybody realized that we were facing something radically different. We were talking about something we didn't have to do any modification with. For thousands and millions of years, they have been there. The bacteria is very much polished. It is a polished diamond that we can take advantage of. They are versatile because the same scissors, the same nucleus that can cut the DNA, we can make it cut in any part of the genome, any living being, just by changing the RNA guide. And then we will make it complementary to our favorite gene. The only thing we have to change is that guide to promote the editing of that gene. We are talking about proteins that cut the DNA. Let's never forget the biological origin of these tools. They were selected or designed to attack the virus that entered the bacteria and to break the DNA. So the main role is to cut the DNA. And that's why you will see that the current applications are already using that easy way to cut the DNA. But of course, you can cut the DNA and do things now that before were very difficult to be done. For example, a C here maybe is associated to a congenital or hereditary disease. If we want to change a Z by an A, this writing or this cut and paste and color, that is what we can do now with CRISPR. This is the scheme or the pattern you may have seen many times, and this is the basis of CRISPR tools or techniques. And I'd like to underscore that most of the things we have discussed in recent years, also from an ethical perspective and a legal perspective, it refers only to what now we call CRISPR techniques of first generation. I'd like to highlight that these first generation techniques have some specificities that will be improved when I comment on the second generation and third generation ones. But let's not mix generations, because they are happening at such a high speed that sometimes it is difficult to maintain the evolution. This double chain cut that happens first in a chromosome, the favorite gene, has to be resolved by the cell. The cell has proteins that will identify those cuts so that a chromosome fragment is not lost next time the division takes place or the breaking down. One of the proteins that is in charge of identifying those cuts is PC53. And that's why the person, if that person does not have or has this PC53 affected, probably will develop cancer. If we have a functional PC53, we will identify the cuts and we will be able to correct it. We can correct it badly and very soon to the left, or guide it right pathway that you see there in blue. That one uses an exogenous sequence, and we are capable of editing. If you have a look at other talks or other articles I have given, or other of my colleagues, we all believed that the right pathway was going to be the one we would use. We were all wrong for a long time. That right pathway still cannot be controlled. We still do not know how it works. It is very complicated to regulate that sequence, whereas the left pathway is the one that happens in most of the cells. The right one only happens in some cells, and more specifically in those that are undergoing division. But many of our cells in all our life will never be divided, so the right pathway is not so relevant. The relevant one is the left pathway, because it tries to put in and out letters randomly, and some G's will be before the C's or A's before the C's, and as if it was the teeth of a zip, you hook up the two extremes or ends of a chromosome and you reconstitute the entity of the chromosome. As you have putting and out letters, probably the gene will stop working, and this is therapeutic consequences. We can design therapies that are based on the inactivation of genes that now we can inactivate in a specific way. So we can select, replace, modify, insert, mark, whatever your imagination tells you to do. Imagination is your limit. These are the tools designed by Champagny and Tourna in 2012. In yellow you have the nucleus, usually a Cas9, but there are many other, and they cut in the triangle, the red triangle, and the blue molecule, an RNA, binds our favorite gene. This is the guide molecule. This is what happened in 2012. 12 years after, nowadays, what you see here on the screen is just commercial. So it is very simple to work with CRISPR, and we can afford it. It's very cheap. You can buy recombinant nucleus. You have the pathway distributed into two different RNA fragments. One is variable and one is common. that is the one that maintains the binding. The most easy thing to do is to break a gene. It's obvious. The disruption of a gene is obvious. I have been involved in genetic modification of living beings. I can tell you that in the 90s, the experiment would take us 2 years, and the experiment nowadays will take us 2 weeks. So you may have an idea of our level of excitement to work with CRISPR tools. Why should we want to activate a gene, for example, to treat a disease? This is a rare disease that affects 1 out of 100,000 people. It is the transthyretin amyloidosis congenital, ATTR from now on. People die due to this disease. One way to control this disease is to inactivate, cut this gene, and we can do it now thanks to CRISPR tools. In 2018, Intelia, a company, verified this possibility with mice, and then in 2001 they did first with primates by administering just once these CRISPR therapies, and they realized that just with one administration, very low levels in the gene, after 1 year they saw the benefits. And here we have what is most important, the first patients that have already been treated with this CRISPR tool, and they have been able to decrease the toxic protein levels in blood. What is most important about this application developed by Intelia, as well as demonstrated that it was possible to launch this therapy, is that instead of using the vehicles to transfer the CRISPR tools, that is usually these viral particles that are emptied of the real content, and then you replace them and insert the CRISPR tools inside. Well, this company bet on lipid nanoparticles, the so-called LNPs. These LNPs have an advantage. They have been tested in the greatest experiment worldwide in the whole history of humanity. They were the LNPs massively used in COVID-19 vaccines by Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech. This was the good thing about the pandemic, thanks to the use of these lipid nanoparticles, thanks to which we were cured. Now these LNPs are used to transfer the CRISPR tools. We can also promote the deletion. These deletions, specific deletions, now are very frequent. We know it. But when we started to perform these experiments in 2013, we didn't know whether this was going to work, whether the cell was going to be run and periodically eliminate this fragment limited by 2 CRISPR complexes. This is the basis of many hereditary diseases. And the attempt of trying to reproduce these deletions in the lab was complicated. We have applied it to a rare disease I have studied for more than 30 years, and it is albinism. People with affected vision, and they also show pigmentary modifications. We use mice for our experiment. Genetically, it's very complex. 22 genes are associated with albinism. But what I'd like to share with you today here is that more than 30% of our patients cannot be genetically diagnosed. Clinically, we see that they suffer from albinism, but we do not identify any mutation in any of these genes. This also happens to other hereditary rare diseases. One of the reasons being is that clinically, currently, we only have the codon sequences, and they only represent the 2% of the genome, whereas we have a 98% of genome. They correspond to DNA non-coding sequences, and for many years they have been neglected and they have not been subject to any study. But well, this is where the genetic control systems or elements are. For example, one of the genes we have studied is the tear. It is involved in the melamine synthesis. When it fails, then there is a lack of melamine. It has some regulatory elements, and for more than 20 years, many PhD works and theses, many people who had to work a lot without any success. For more than 20 years, these regulatory elements were not eliminated. But thanks to CRISPR, we could cut to the left and to the right and eliminate this regulatory element. If we eliminate this one that is close to the gene, then the mouse that is born, you do not have to be an expert. The mouse on the top is gray and the one on the bottom darker. So these T regulatory elements with CRISPR in vivo effect is obvious. So we could do experiments and many other laboratories as well, thanks to CRISPR tools. I'll use this deleting 5G regulatory element with CRISPR in vivo so that you can see what happens on a molecular level. Why? Because when we refer to risk, to uncertainty, when we want to assess that risk on an ethical and legal standpoint, we need to know what is happening. These lines, each of these lines represents a different mouse, and the black part represents what has been deleted. I wanted to delete what is between the two ends, and most of the mice I obtain have that deleted area. But watch out, there are some mice that have nearby areas also deleted. And this happens in mice, but it also happens in any other experiment when using CRISPR tools applied to human beings, rabbits, whatever species. And we are capable of identifying inversions. And this was not in the instruction manual. The fragment we want to delete, not only is it not deleted properly, but rather it rotates and inserts itself again. And this generates uncertainty, risk, and this is happening not only in these mice, but as I said, in all experiments when you use this approach. First time this was tried with a therapeutical reason was done in 2015, and then the first articles were published in 2016. 3 labs published these experiments in the model of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. In these 3 articles, these 3 laboratories decided to delete the part of the gene mutated, the exome, cutting just before and after the exome, and rebinding the rest of the gene segments. To the left, we have a healthy mouse with green color of the protein. In the center, dystrophic mouse. And to the right, we have 15% of muscular fibers. So it was shown that it was possible to restore the functioning, partially at least, and then 2 years later, it was demonstrated with dogs, with real dogs. But we have to read the small letter as well, because a small letter tells us that the correction factor is 3.92%, and this means that sometimes it works and sometimes doesn't work. And this illustrates that in this disease still we cannot jump to therapy of models. to be applied to people. And I said still, because we will see someone who thought they were ready. Recently, we have found out about the result of the lead gene, a fragment of the gene Z. You have here a degeneration of the retina with sight loss, and it is caused by a signal that appears in one of these genes. And then with CRISPR, you cut to the left and the right, and you again delete, and you eliminate it. But things do not always happen as we wish or we think. There will always be a degree of uncertainty. Last week, we knew about the results, phase 1 and phase 2 of this approach promoted by the company Eritas. 9 out of 11 patients treated in this clinical trial have recovered the sight, at least partially. Another example of deletion. Deletions in clinical trials have to do with deletion and inactivation and not replacement. So the right pathway, I repeat, we still do not know how to use it. That's why most of these trials are still focusing on the left pathway, just to cut and delete. Probably the most successful experiment that has given way to the therapy approved in United States of America, UK, and Europe is the therapy that allows you to treat the sickle cell disease and the beta thalassemia. It's a classical example of a therapy based on basic research. The group by Gorkin, Stuart Gorkin's group, a pediatrician from Boston, who realized that the hemoglobin we all have in adults, formed by 2 alpha and 2 beta chains, when we are developing as a fetus, that beta chain does not exist, and it is replaced by fetal gamma chain codified by the gene of the same name, because it shuts off when we are born. But why? Because there is a repressor that maintains that gene silenced. And this repressor was discovered by this group. It is called BCL1A. So if beta globin is usually mutated, what would happen if we apply CRISPR to delete some control elements of this repressor? If we repress the repressor, we will be able to promote what is repressed. This is a great idea, a fantastic idea. And it worked. If we repress the repressor, we can turn that mutated beta into gamma, and now we have hemoglobin circulating in adults. But also we do not have red cells with a shape of half moon, which collapses the vessels, and there is not that formation of aggregates. The first patient treated was this lady called Victoria Gray. This was her blood when the results were published 1 year after. In green, metaglobin, in blue, HbA that was replaced gradually. We made Victoria Gray, and last year in the CRIC, in the 3rd International Summit on Human Genome Editing, Altataro and many other speakers were there. Victoria Gray was very, very thankful, and she was thrilled. She became a celebrity at that summit, but she was also concerned. She was concerned because we all started to discover at that summit that this new therapy that was curing patients, and patients did not need any more transfusions, blood transfusions, and did not suffer from any pain, that therapy was going to be very, very expensive. This is the first therapy approved in November in UK. By the FDA approved it on the 8th of December. The European agency recommends on the 15th of December the approval, and it was later on approved on the 12th of February. In Spain, still we cannot administer it. Why? Because the Spanish agency has to fulfill the process, complete the process, and also because the health ministry, the Department of Chemists, has to set up a price for this treatment to be administered, and this has not happened yet. But in the United States, probably it will cost $2.2 million per patient. This is something that should make us reflect. There are 400,000 people a year who are born with sickle cell disease, and many of them in Africa. 400,000. Do you think that these people in Africa will be able to be treated with this treatment at this price? No way. So we have a problem. The problem is of a different type. We have cured an incurable disease, but we are incapable, so far, we are incapable of taking this treatment to everybody who needs it. We are violating the fourth principle of bioethics, the principle of justice, according to which everything that we develop should be useful for those who can afford it, but also for those who need it. The association of REACH, promoting the responsible use of genetic tools. I chair this association. It is an honor for me. We promoted, with the help of our scientific council or committee, the publication of this article. I invite you to read it. It is entitled Ethics of CRISPR Gene Therapy, and we address topics such as accessibility, affordability, justice, and equity. These are the topics that we should discuss now. We have solved this disease and other diseases, but we have not been able to make that everybody benefits from these therapies. When I talk to associations of patients, they wonder, can there be anything worse with a rare disease? Yes. To have a kid with a rare disease, to know that there is a therapy, and to know that your son will never have access to that therapy. That is terrible, and we have to solve that issue. We need to know how to get that therapy close to everybody. We have to talk to the pharmacists so that the price set is affordable by everybody. And that is what we are doing now. Different solutions have been proposed. The Innovative Genomics Institute, associated to the California University, has proposed some measures to lower 90% the price. Intelia, also associated to Jennifer Nylia, has another system that may be a potential solution. They have not only developed this therapy, but also against this disease, but also against angioedema, hereditary angioedema, to delete the gene of kallikrein. Look at the model of precaution of these therapies. This may be a solution, and it is related to the reuse of the globules to treat amyloidosis. We use the same lipid nanoparticles, the same Cas9, the mRNA Cas9, and the only thing we do is to change the guide. In the first disease, we it is focused on the second one, it is focused on the gene, or it is guided towards the gene. And if we do so, we can decrease the price. Also, other things can be done. For example, point mutations. This has not been done yet in the lab, but it has been revolutionary because we have learned how to inactivate genes in a much more appropriate way. In the way mutations are presented. We have thousands of mutations accumulated for many years, but we delete great fragments of the gene stops working, but these great deletions of the gene does not happen in human beings. In human beings is only one letter, the one that is mutated, and this subtle mutation was very difficult to reproduce.
So we have these avatar mice, like you remember the characters in the James Cameron's Avatar movie, the first one, the only good one, in which the blue beings were connected to each one of the human beings. And this is the metaphor I used to generate, for example, Pepe's avatar. Pepe's got one type of albinism, and this is his avatar. He doesn't have pigments in skin and eyes. This is Kike. He's got an intermediate pigmentation level. This is Charles, a black guy from Cameroon, and look at the hair type, the hair color, and look at the avatar. And this is Patty, who doesn't have a C on one of the proteins, and that's why one of the proteins has got deficits. And this is a mutant mouse. And why do we use this? To validate new molecules and reposition drugs that were once described to treat a specific disease that now can be used to treat a completely different disease. What else? We can inactivate the cutting capacity of the CRISPR tools. Why? Why would you use scissors that you cannot use for cutting? Well, you can use it for cutting, and then to reposition this complex in a specific place in the genome, because the DNA guide, even if the nucleus is not cutting anymore, will be positioning it in the complementary sequence of a favorite gene. If we add something that boosts the gene expression, we can reactivate a silent gene. This is what we call the epigenetic use, or the epigenetic modification through CRISPR tools. This was tested. This was, for example, the proposal done by Curad. This is in Boston. The CEO of this company had a sibling, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. His brother has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he tried to treat this patient with a dead Cas9 with the VP64 system that boosts basically this. This is basically an epigenetic modification, and they used the adeno-associated viral particles, and they use a basic rule in virology, so an number X of virus and person, and 70 kilogram person. So you use this trillions of particles. Look at the numbers. This is crazy, and this is totally uncontrollable. So he died a few days ago, even before recovering or experiencing therapeutic improvement. So this means that therapies cannot move directly from mice to person. And remember, when I was talking about the Duchenne muscular dystrophy, we're not in the position to use these kind of technologies in some diseases. We can use it to repress a gene, and this was demonstrated by Angelo Lombardo in Milano in San Raffaele, in this case by using the zinc finger nucleases and proteins bound to a repressing segment to lower the expression of a gene, to then regulate a gene, in this case PCSK9, that regulates the level of cholesterol in blood. Of course, we have some current limitations with these tools, we all know them. The first one is, for example, the off-target effects. Because the RNA molecules, of course, do not just bind to their favorite genes, but other similar genes. This is something that we know more and more because we have guide design programs. But there is one more complication we were not expecting. The first human genome appeared in 2009, then it was enhanced and improved in 2003, but for 20 years we've been using a baseline genome that never existed, because the one that is deposited in the databases is a mosaic genome composed of cells from many different people, so it didn't exist, it did never exist. But so far so good, because we've been using, and we all know, we all resemble, we'll look alike at 99%. So there's only a 1% difference in 3 million base pairs from our father and 3 more million from our mother. So we have between 3 to 6 million different letters between each of you and myself. Most of them are due to individual differences and also populational differences. For example, if you belong to certain geographical populations that have a tendency to express certain letters. So that's why we want to create a pangenome, because we want to compare all these millions of letters. This is very complicated, and that's why we use algorithms and artificial intelligence, because we need to look for the possible presence of sequence that can interfere with our experiment. The genome in Southern Europe, for example, but also the African, the Asian, the North American, or the Scandinavian genomes. And this has got consequences. For example, with Cas heavy, one of the guides that we use to inactivate BCL11A is also present in the same chromosome where BCL11A is present. So 2 cuts in the same chromosomes is not possible because they can create deletions and reversals. And this also takes place in people from an Afro-American descent with a very high likelihood. Approximately 10% will have this sequence. So this is the supposedly baseline reference that we need to take into account, but also the genomes of many different populations. The problem lies in the mosaicism. The right path is the most diverse one, because every time this molecule needs to repair itself, it uses a different repair mechanism. How can we know this? This is one of the mice I was using. I wanted to correct the disease, and it's got mosaicism because this embryo split itself in 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. In each of those divisions, there was genetic noise created. You can see it in the pigmentation and in these sequences, because each one of these lines is a different mouse. This is a result in one experiment in my lab. You look at the variability that takes place in mice and humans alike. So look at the mice that are born to me. All of them are mosaic. mice, and this is easy to solve because I can cross-breed the mouse that has the allele I need, and I segregate it from the lab. But I cannot do this to humans. I cannot say to one of your patients, I can treat you, but maybe one of your children will be born with this modified allele. So this is the Achilles talon. How can we solve these limitations? This is why David Liu is important, because David Liu is a researcher that goes beyond. He can make up proteins that the evolution could never make up. We use what nature has created, we take it to our labs. But David Liu is ahead of nature. For example, base editing a gene where a deaminase has been bound to the case9 case that can cut one chain or not a single chain. This is a second generation CRISPR tools. The deaminases convert a C to a T or a G. This is really complicated because it positions case9. By using case9, they use a deaminase dominion that touches the letter that needs modifying. Sometimes we don't just touch the one we want to modify, but also the neighboring layers if we have already tried to correct this. And this is, for example, disease that has been treated with base editors. In this case, we also used it for sickle cell disease in mice, always in mice. So instead of a C, we got a G. Instead of valina, we gave galadina, which is something that already exists in the population. Alanina is shared by some people in this position, so we're not making this up. And this can have therapeutic consequences. Maybe you can use them to activate genes. Of course you can, because we can transform a codon that initially codes for glutamic acid. With C, it is a stuck codon, so we truncate the expression of that gene. And this is what lies behind this proposal by Kiranos and Buru to base editing PCSK9 to lower cholesterol impairment. We increase the receptor in the liver. It stocks more low-density lipoproteins in blood and lowers cholesterol. This was already done in several animal models, including primates, apes. The base editors cured Lisa. She got acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She didn't respond to any treatment, chemo or radiotherapy, but then they used base-edited CAR T cells, and then in May 2023 through 22, she received base editors. Only 6 years after David Liu proposed them for the first time in 2016. We can also use them to edit mitochondrial DNA, because mitochondria cannot import DNA, but they can import proteins. So David Liu decided to replace CRISPR with TALEN, the tail that responds to the binding of that protein to the DNA. So if we bind them to the aminases, we can use them on the mitochondria and edit. But David Liu did not settle with the second generation, so he went on to the third generation, and at the end of 2019 he decided to mix an ACase with the reverse transcriptase, which is a protein that can do the opposite of the RNA polymerase. It can synthesize DNA from RNA. this is wonderful. This is a diagram that tries to explain the one end of the guide helps us identify the gene, and the other end matches to the complementary chain of the DNA and serves as a mouth to extend the DNA that we want. What is the advantages of this third generation tool? That if we put them together, first generation on the left, third generation on the right, look at the modification abilities, same size, so to say, but there is no mosaicism. So this gives us a lot of tools that we can use to do virtually any type of genetic modification. Of course, the applications we want to create are for basically medicine, but there are many others for plants, for animals, genetic impulse for population control. But we also need to wonder about the destination of these applications. And here we need to talk again about ethics and legislation. Do we want to use them to treat a person, an embryo, or to improve the qualities, the traits of a person? It is okay to use them to cure a person. I would say it's compulsory, because if we can develop a therapy, we must do it. To cure an embryo, well, it depends on the country. In Spain, for example, one of the pioneers of the pioneer of this convention of Oviedo prohibits genetically modifying our offspring. So if we think this is a good idea, we need a majority vote in the parliament to change this convention. And well, in my case, I would not in any case use these tools and the associated amount of money to improve a person's traits. Many humanists want to use these tools to improve a human being. It is true that the line between curing a person and improving a person is sometimes blurred. For example, in 2018 we had the problem with He Jiankui. He decided to use them on embryos. This is something that we could do in Spain because the law passed in 2006 allows us to use this on embryos. We cannot use them to create an embryo, but to treat embryos. He decided to use them to create an embryo. He decided to inactivate the CCR5, the one that is responsible for HIV. But the receptor is not there for the virus to get into the body. The virus uses the receptor to replicate. Well, so this gentleman did this experiment, and 3 girls were born out of it. They need constant medical supervision. So he is in jail, and well, this is one of the bad people in CRISPR tools. But the gene therapy that we can use so far is the somatic gene therapy, the one that we can use to treat people in vivo or ex vivo by extracting cells from a person, editing and treating them in a lab, and then putting them back in the person. Of course, the ex vivo therapy is safer than the in vivo one, so most of the clinical trials are done ex vivo. There are almost 100 clinical trials taking place right now with different versions of CRISPR. This is what we thought would happen in 2013 when many of us published papers and reviews. We thought CRISPR tools would be used to cut around the mutation to give the system the correct sequence, the green stick, and to correct the mutation. This is what we thought. This is not happening. We don't know how to do this. This is something that I do with my mice, but it succeeds in 1 out of 20 cases, and I'm very happy with that. But it's only 5% efficiency. But that's not enough to put it into practice. I need 40, 60%, and we're very far from this. But what we can do is, if we cannot modify the mutated allele, we can inactivate it. And this is exactly what we are doing. And most of the clinical trials use the cutting capacity of the CRISPR tools to delete genes, for example, in cancer immunotherapy. This is probably the most common use of CRISPR, and yet unknown. Part of this immunotherapy starts with gene inactivation, for example, PD-1, that are negative genes in the immune system. By deleting these genes, the immune system in the patient can react more aggressively against the cancer cells. This is what's happening already. So, in summary, today, what we know, what we can do with these CRISPR trials is as follows. On the one hand, we can inactivate genes with the first generation CRISPR tools, for example, Cas9. We can also inactivate genes with the base editors, or we can also do it epigenetically with epigenetic editing. We can also use it to correct genes, to replace one sequence with another, but we don't know exactly what we can use. Maybe the second generation CRISPR tools base editors, or even the prime editors. I don't know, maybe they will be solving these problems. The first clinical trials in prime editing will be taking place this year. And then the delivery technologies will be we will be making the associated virus with the lipid nanoparticles together. The AAVs, VLPs with mRNA and lipid nanoparticles. I have 2 minutes left, and I will be talking about something that we've been doing with Francis Mojica that illustrates how we are at the tip of the iceberg. There are many more things that we still don't know about the CRISPR tools. What I want to say is about a remark of by our friend Matthew Porteous from Stanford University, whom I admire. He remarked that the CRISPR tools that we use derive from Streptococcus pyogenes and Staphylococcus aureus. Even if you don't know much about microbiology, you know that these are pathogen bacteria, otitis and laryngitis, and many more diseases. Matthew Porteous thought to himself, well, maybe most of the people will have antibodies about the case proteins of these bacteria, because we have, almost all of us had skin infections or caused by aureus and otitis and things like that. And he was true. He was right. Most of us have these kind of antibodies. So if we want to use this as a therapy, we will have a problem, because we will create an immune system problem. So that's why we cannot use Cas9. And maybe you can understand now that the most successful therapies that are now being delivered are the ones based on mRNA. The protein is not being administered in itself. Only the mRNA that needs to enter the cell and then become the protein. We have millions of bacteria that can have this CRISPR-Cas that we still don't know. And many people have been looking for bacteria in remote areas of the world that have nothing to do with human beings. For example, Atacama Desert in Chile, Antarctica, the Marianas Pit, or the thermal pools in Yellowstone. Places where you can find bacteria that probably never interact with human beings. But Francis, who's humble and honest and full of good ideas, said, well, we're looking for CRISPR-Cas in the pool beneath my house or behind my house. This is located in Elto, where he lives. So we did a metagenome application, and this is the EH CRISPR-Cas9. EH because that's the name of the pond, El Hondo. And this is one of the first experiments that we performed to demonstrate that any of us can find bacteria in a plant pot, in any place, bacteria that are still to be discovered. And at the same time, we were looking for Cas9 proteins, not in outer space and in remote areas, but in time.
Why don't we go to the back, million of years back in time? We have been here only 1 million of years on the planet Earth, but bacteria have been here 3,000 million of years. The first bacteria appeared 3,500 million of years ago. The 600 million of years ago, most of the current animal groups appeared. What we wanted to do with all these figures is to take out a nucleus of these million of years back in time. But the problem we are facing is that the oldest DNA found in nature is hardly 2,000 million of years old. And therefore, we had to go to and talk to Raúl Pérez, a paleologist expert, and he applies ancestral sequence reconstruction techniques. It is a statistical system with a supercomputer. We give the computer all the potential relationships, and we say, well, calculate the ancestral relationship that can explain the current variability. And then when you have calculated it, calculate the ancestor of the ancestor of the ancestor of the ancestor. This works. What is surprising is that it does work. In red, we have the Cas9. In purple, 60% a protein of 37 million years ago. In orange, the one of 137. In yellow, 200. In green, 1,000 million years back in time. There is no way to demonstrate that these proteins existed. But you know what? You have no way to demonstrate that what has not existed. So we do not care, because after all, what we want is different proteins that are not acknowledged by our antibodies. And this is what we have demonstrated. So there is a wide range of CRISPR systems that may be found in nature in different times. I will finish with the current challenges ahead of us to develop CRISPR systems that are robust and efficient for DNA modifications, deletions. We have to develop and improve new safe delivery systems. We need base editing clinical assays for altering, not inactivating genes. We have a lot of experience with prime editing, clinical assays. We should identify and establish alternative CRISPR-Cas systems. We should reduce the off-target effects to the minimum in all or most of genomes. We have to reduce mosaicism. We have to decrease the price significantly for all these therapies, and what is most important, these therapies should be accessible and affordable to everyone. These are the people who work with me. I am the only one here telling you the story, but they are all responsible for the experiments, and these are the institutions, entities that have supported us financially. Thank you so much.
¿Hay preguntas o no? Bueno, yo no sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta. Yo
I don't know whether anyone has any question. I'll be happy to try to answer it, or any comment. You can ask questions in English or Spanish, likewise. Otherwise, that's all. Thank you so much, Lluís. And, well, during the Congress, anyone can approach you to ask you during coffee breaks, lunch breaks, etc. And now you are all invited to a cocktail. We will have some Spanish wine to continue sharing some moments with you and celebrating this conference. Thank you so much.